All right, I'd like to call this workshop for the West Dallas West Milwaukee School Board to order. Suzette, would you please do the roll?
Yes. Mrs. Carr.
Here.
Ms. Steele. Here. Mrs. Kaiser is excused. Mr. Burns.
Here.
Mr. Becker.
Here. Here.
Here. Mr. Sikich.
Present.
And Mr. Keller is excused. President Lee.
Here. All right, we have two workshops this evening, starting off with our communications communications workshop. Did you want to do an introduction? Dr. Stewart?
Yes, so tonight is our first of 4 school showcases, and we have our friends from Longfellow who were bold enough to sign up for our first date of the year, so they're here with us. Some of our students, so I think what we'll do best-
Yeah, you might just want to come to Mike if you don't mind.
So we have our friends from Longfellow here tonight, and I think what will work best if, as a board, we just go join them. And then they are going to take it from there with their introductions and share some of their learning with us.
All right.
Sounds good. So for those of you who are on Zoom, this might be a little bit hard to hear, so please bear with us. But we'll be back for the second part of the workshop once we get done hearing about what Longfellow has to say. So let's go, everyone. Just hold it up. Just hold it up.
Congratulations. Yeah. Are we live right now? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, later. That's fun. Think about, they've only been in school for how long? and
Well,
2 projects.
exactly. And those are big
Yeah.
undertakings. I
And
mean,
those
yeah.
used to be, like, we did those projects, but we would do like 1 a year and it took forever.
Right, yeah, it was like
This is
all
just more
year
like
long, yeah.
They're so, getting so good at doing this kind of learning that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they'll have several done by the time the quarter's over.
Well, and it's not just like an art project, you know, like it's a problem that, you know, that they actually solve in a fun way, you know?
And there was so much more involved, like when she was talking about the struggle of getting those letters right.
Yeah,
That, you know, basically that's one of the pieces of engineering where you have to have a plan first. and you
Yep.
have to figure it out. and you have to
exactly,
Map it out.
right?
So
Oh,
there
yeah,
was all kinds of things going on.
Sure.
They
exactly.
didn't just draw them out.
Right, exactly.
There's a
Mhm.
lot
Do we need to
for
take
that.
Yep.
So, yeah, we'll mark up to John Shore, 6:30. Get started, but
Can we get started with that?
we can, yeah.
Yeah,
he'll be
okay.
here shortly, so.
All right. Well, I'll just thank Longfellow community for coming out and giving us a demonstration of learning. It's always great to see what's going on in our schools. 2 great projects over there, which sound really interesting. So thank you again for that, Longfellow and staff, for taking the time to come here this evening. So I guess we'll then move on to our second workshop for the evening, which is 3.2 Recreation and Financial Stability and Efficiency School Consolidation Workshop Part 3. And I know we have some people that are still on the way, but I'll turn it over to Mr. Norris to get us started.
Yeah, Shelley should be on Zoom. Oh, she's on Zoom.
Yeah, she's on there.
Awesome, great. So I'll get us started here. Are you gonna pull up the presentation? Yep. Okay, so we have the presentation that we'll work through, and I'm gonna kick it off and then turn it over to Shelley Strasser, our Director of Recreation and Community Services, to walk through the background and the kind of real detail of the proposal. And then at some point she'll turn it over to Aaron Norris, our Director of Finance and Operations, to go through some of the financial implications of this. And at about 6:30, or maybe a little bit sooner, we should have Mark Duff and John Shore joining us. So Mark Duff, from Director of Finance and Operations, between Caitlin and Aaron. And has been kind of in the background consulting on this, and Mark brings a tremendous amount of experience. He's really here to help answer questions about the legitimacy of this kind of financial arrangement, but also to offer some insight onto the strategic implications of what's being proposed here, because it's not just the idea of the project about Lane becoming a recreation center, but there's some long-term strategic financial implications that maybe Mark can be helpful around. And then John Shore will join us, and he's an attorney that helps us in big contracts and helped us when we sold this building and the building next door. He's not here to advise whether or not this is a good idea. That's not his job. His job is, if the board is inclined to move down the road with this, to really advise on, are there any legal implications that the board should consider or be aware of or anticipate. So that's John's job joining us. So with that, what I want to do is provide a little bit of context of how the pieces fit together, because this is, it feels like this is happening quickly, and actually it's part of kind of long-term work and planning. And where we are right now is really in the convergence between the school consolidations and what's happening financially, creating a kind of cool opportunity for us, right? But it is not something that arrived kind of in the moment all of a sudden. It really has some long-term planning behind it. And that really ties back to our strategic plan, which is where we try to find everything that provides some direction and some pathway for us. There's 2 parts of the strategic plan, one in the goal areas. Hey, John, welcome. So everybody, this is John Shore. I just introduced you and then you walked in, which is great.
See you, John. Thanks for coming.
So John, I'm going to repeat this just so John hears what I described your role to the board. I said, you're here, as part of, the council we've had, and big contracts and selling buildings and some of those things. You're not here to advise on whether or not this is a good idea. You're really here to advise on if the board is inclined to consider this, on what are the legal implications that the board should be aware of or consider or be prepared for. And so that's really our job to provide the rationale for why we think this is a good idea. John's job is to help us figure out how to make it happen the right way. Right? So hopefully that makes sense. So again, where this ties is really to our strategic plan. And there's two pieces of it that I think directly align to the proposal that Shelley will walk us through, is really developing and implementing a facilities master plan. And that facilities master plan was completed. That was one of the goals in the strategic plan that we've met. But the master plan includes and anticipated early on the consolidation of schools due to declining enrollment and the amount of space we have and the amount of cost associated with trying to maintain older buildings. Right. So the board did approve the first 3 schools to consolidate, one of which is Lane Intermediate School, which is the school that's of interest for the Recreation and Community Services Department. So this ties into the whole facility master planning process in school consolidations. It partly creates the opportunity to consider something like this. The other one is really working, is part of, it's a strategy in the strategic plan, is really working with high schools to really expand extracurricular and co-curricular opportunities. So that's been something of interest for us as a school district, as a school board. And expanding recreation opportunities or opportunities through recreation and community services helps us move the needle on that. And we've made some strategic moves inside of recreation with some of this already that I'll touch on in the next slide. So Aaron, you can go ahead. So like I talked about, this is really a moment where there's alignment between some opportunities that have been built inside of our work on our strategic plan and then some actions that could take place that really help us move forward. So this really comes out of years of really effective fiscal stewardship because we've, over the last 8 years, have worked really hard to build a solid financial footing, and we're there. We have a very healthy fund balance. We have a Fund 46, which is capital improvement funds that has a good amount of money in it. We'll continue to put dollars there. The board has also, I think, wisely started to designate dollars within fund balance for future retirement liabilities. So everything has lined up with our, I think, smart fiscal planning. When Lane was initially proposed as a school that was being considered for consolidation, so well before even the community engagement process, well before any board conversations, Shelley came forward and said, we might be interested in this. The feedback around the new recreation center has been really positive, and they very quickly have maximized that facility. Right, so we still have lots of rec that competes with spaces for athletics and gyms and community rooms. And so they expressed some interest in it well before we even knew that Lane was ultimately where the board would go in terms of the school consolidation. One of the things that happened, though, that started to expand access, so that idea of expanding extracurricular and athletic opportunities, we moved youth sports and youth theater, or intermediate school sports and youth theater, into recreation. Right? So that's part of their budget, so that there's more dollars that support those efforts. And it opens the door to all students in the community. Right? So because it's through recreation, families that choose to open and roll out or in private schools can participate. So if you think of the summer musical Matilda, which a bunch of you went to see, and I saw it, and we had a bunch of excerpts from it at the school opening, which was super well received by teachers because they see all of their former students up on the stage. But the young lady that played the teacher, who was phenomenal and one of the best voices on the stage, is a young person that lives in West Allis but attends High School of the Arts in Milwaukee. Right, so she has a talent to be in Milwaukee High School of the Arts, but was in our summer musical because it's offered through rec. Right, so that's the idea of expanding these opportunities through recreation. The other thing that really starts to happen is through recreation, then we're connecting students to the community. And what I love about our recreation and community services, it really works hard to connect community members to each other. And it is, I think, one of the challenges that we've had as a school district about telling our story, and in particular, the story of all the positive things that are happening. And I think growing recreation and having more than one space that represents recreation also represents us, right? Because recreation is associated with the school district, which is not unique in Wisconsin, but not entirely, or it is a little bit unusual because it's not universal. Some municipalities run recreation themselves, some have school districts that run recreation, and we're one of the fortunate ones where it's aligned with the district. And then again, this is really about taking steps to pursue some of our long-term strategic vision, about expanding recreation and community services, supporting the work that we're doing in schools, and taking some concrete steps now that help fulfill that opportunity. So with that, I will turn this over to Shelley Strasser to give more detail on the background related to the recreation interest in this, and then how the pieces start to fit together, and that'll lead to Aaron to take us into the financing of this. And then if there are questions, I think along the way, if there are questions for clarity, like, wait, what did you just say? If you're not quite catching kind of what we're doing, for clarity's sake, but for substance conversation, I'd encourage you to save that to the end, because I think some questions will get answered through the course of the presentation this evening. So with that, Shelley, we are all yours.
All right, thank you, Dr. Lexman, and good evening, everyone. So when Lane first became part of the school district, that was a unique opportunity for us in our department, and we were able to pretty quickly implement a significant number of programs there. And so since then, we have taken full advantage of the opportunities to have access and use the spaces there, both in the main gym, the auxiliary gym, and then even some overflow programs into the cafeteria. So it's been very beneficial to us. Along with the rec center, though, it's not a replacement. Neither one of those two spaces is a replacement for each other. They're more of an in addition to, because unfortunately, a number of the other spaces we have available, gym spaces in the district, just really aren't either space-wise conducive for a lot of the programs, whether it's adult fitness or youth sports, things like that. So, you know, when the conversations first came out, I will say staff probably really, our admin team really felt it as kind of a hit. What are we going to do? Where are we going to go? So as Dr. Lexman kind of referenced, we started talking about, hey, could we, should we, is it possible to look at our department purchasing Lane and doing some renovations there? We know we do a satisfaction survey at the end of every season. So at the end of fall, winter, spring, and summer, real simple, quick 4-question survey that we actually get some really good feedback on. But from that, we really learn our community members like to participate in programs that are either near their home, in their neighborhood, near where they work. So we do have some concerns about losing sort of that West End location. We also know that it would provide more equitable opportunities for some of our families. We know district-wide, there are families that face financial barriers, transportation barriers, and just some challenges getting to other locations. This would provide another opportunity on the west side. And then even bigger is we currently face gym challenges. And some examples on the high school level, we've had to find alternate space at Lane, at the rec center, for our high school sports. Our basketball programs have been trying to do some off-season skills training, and they're not able, just with the way the fall seasons are, get gym time in the fall. They've had to move for elections, forms and fees days. We've had to move volleyball practices to the rec center, concerts, just school events and different district events. So, you know, when we talk about really growing and strengthening our high school sports programs, our coaches and our athletic directors and our athletes are up against some challenges. And it's just our own challenges of when can we do it? Where can we go to do it? Where's the space to do it without competing against ourselves? And obviously we cannot displace the sports that are in season, but oftentimes that's what we're finding is because of some of these other challenges, we're having to displace in season sports and really not having any conducive spaces for them to go to. So this would help with that. So when we looked at it, right, we looked at kind of what would the sort of fair market value be for a purchase in relation to kind of what we want to do and some plans there. And we just don't have the funds and the fund balance to be able to do that, along with some of the other projects that we also have in process going on. So I'm not sure who has control of the slides, but if you want to, don't mind going to the next one. So what does Lane look like for us in terms of usage? Right now, we offer 10 different unique programs, and that kind of maybe doesn't really sound like a lot, but those are programs that are there pretty much Monday through Saturday. And it's a variety of programs from youth sports. Our junior Huskies basketball program has been holding a lot of their practices there. Our adult sports are there. We do adult fitness classes. So there's a real variety. And when we ran some data, over the last year, we had 11,169 number of individual uses. So that's every different kind of touch point when somebody comes there. So we sort of took that out, and it's an average of 31 people using that facility per day in a year. Now you might think that doesn't necessarily sound like a lot, but that's also limited hours. We're only looking at kind of after school hours. When we look at the rec center, you know, we basically, although we don't operate it 24/7, have potential access to. So from early in the morning to later in the evening. So that kind of takes us to where our proposal and where we're at tonight. So what we're looking to do is really a potential 4 to 5 year plan. And this isn't sort of necessarily concrete. There can definitely be conversations and tweaks to things. But what we're looking at proposing instead of a purchase, and I know, you know, that'll be talked about a little bit later, is a lease with the district. We would lease it 4 to 5 years, making a yearly payment. We're proposing a $500,000 lease payment to the district with an increased levy of $2 million. That also allows and affords us for $1.5 million each year to put into renovating and upgrading to get it to a community center that we'd want it to be. It is a beautiful property. However, we know that there's significant amount of capital improvement projects that need to be done. And really, we would be doing things to spaces that aren't necessarily conducive to rec center. So in our first year, what we'd like to do is, and we've already started getting some preliminary numbers, so we know we're relatively in the ballpark, but that would be demolition of the old portion of Lane, and then doing some work that would seal up the new section and move the HVAC system so they're all contained within the new section of the building. The second year, and I'll go into this a little bit more in depth, but just sort of a 360 overview here. We do renovations to the first and second floor of the new section of the building to create some multi-use spaces. And on the first floor, we'd like to convert that office area into a community fitness center. Within the third year, then we'd look to do some work exterior wise, and part of that would be to create more of a destination inclusive. And there's differences that I'll touch on later between an accessible playground, what is an accessible playground, and what's an inclusive playground. But then there's also been other ideas as a department that we've been talking about and looking at and doing some tours of other community centers. And then in years 4 and 5, and this might even based on cost, what we'd really like to offer our community is a warm water pool, if it could be 0 depth. And that would provide opportunities for daytime aquatics access for senior programming, parent and child programming. We even have opportunities we know that exist to contract for therapy programs within spaces like that. So what are the benefits? It's definitely increased and new opportunities for our community. We've already seen, you know, obviously the rec center opened up during COVID, so that was a bit of a challenge, but just since things are kind of somewhat returning back, the amount of programming that we're able to do there, we've already outgrown that space. Our preschool this year is full. Our adult day program for adults with disabilities is near capacity. And we have continued interest there. And the gym space is used for a number of different programs, from open gyms. And that really too has it provided some partnerships for us during the day with the fire department. And we have a group of local police officers that also are utilizing that space. This would allow us to increase and maintain access, right? As I mentioned earlier, losing Lane, we would lose an access point. Overall, it supports community health and wellness, and that also would include health and wellness for our district staff. It provides space for community groups. One of the challenges we've seen, and it's growing, is the number of neighborhood associations, and we're hoping to do some more work in community outreach with them. They're often looking for space just for meetings or different social events. This would provide another opportunity for that. Another benefit, which I think is really of significant interest, is that there's no additional cost to taxpayers. And if you look at what we've been able to do at the rec center with the overall building, you know, maintaining the integrity of the vehicles by adding the garage, our new playground space, all of that was done at no additional cost to the taxpayers. And it really also adds value to community. We've already seen that local realtors are using the rec center as a selling point for, you know, when they're selling and advertising and marketing homes for sale in the area. So I'm going to go a little bit more in depth now on each of one of those points and the things we're looking to do and expand upon. So the first is a community fitness center. There's other school districts that have been doing this for quite some time, and we've been having conversations already with them, been out to see their facilities, doing measurements, things like that. How do they operate? But South Milwaukee, Greenfield, and Shorewood are just a couple of the examples that have them, and they are both available to community and to staff. And there's definitely different ways to sort of package them in terms of memberships and hours and access. And you know, they've already worked through all the details of having, you know, students and community in there at same times, different times, things like that. So that's one thing that we would love to add, and would, I think, be a definitely selling point too for staff and, you know, when we're recruiting. The next is athletic opportunities. Lane, so I'm not sure exactly what year, but we've got to be well into, like, approaching close to probably our 40th, 50th year of our annual alumni tournament. And if you've never been to it, I would strongly encourage people to attend. It's done around the holidays, and it invites not just former basketball players, but pretty much anybody who's attended our schools to come back and participate in our alumni tournament. And just the energy and the excitement and the camaraderie and the community building, and the way it's been structured now for some of the, I'll say our older alumni to combine teams and combine schools. That's our host site. We have formerly played at West Dallas Central, but now again, as we come back to those growing athletic opportunities, our high schools have really found creative ways to offer their own tournaments. So not only are they doing that to provide extra opportunities for their students, but it helps them to save money by hosting their own tournaments. They're not paying for busing, they're not paying entry fees, and they also serve as a fundraiser for them. So, you know, whereas it was kind of a loss to us for space, it was definitely a gain for our high school programs, and we support that. I talked a little bit about the alternate site for our high school teams. It's a practice site for our junior programs. We've been, and I know they've been working really, really hard to increase participation, but it's tough. And it's tough to hold a practice for, you know, those types of programs on in some of our smaller gyms, a Jefferson, you know, even at a Irving and Mitchell that are nicer size gyms. They're tiled floors. They don't provide the same, you know, court structure that they're used to playing on, and just, you know, some of the hoops and things like that. So this would be a nice home to help and support them in growing their programs. And that's both programs. It's not just the Huskies, it's the Bulldogs as well. And having both sites too, right, provides those equitable opportunities if we have one on the east and one on the west. It also provides space. Been working really hard. We have just started a very unique partnership with a club volleyball program called Motion Volleyball. club. They're working to help us with some coaches training. It's one place we really struggle. Volleyball is a pretty specific sport in terms of positioning and techniques and coaching. So working, not only will they work with our coaches, but with our participants and our student athletes from an elementary, from 2nd grade all the way on up through 8th grade. That's one area that we haven't really seen, that we lack in our community and opportunities for kids, and both for boys and girls. So it's an area there. Then the next is an inclusive playground. And so what does that mean? So inclusive playgrounds, it's more about just being accessible. Current research and data has come up with 8 design elements, and that's equitable use, flexibility in how it's structured so that it provides opportunities for kids that maybe like the lower risk, but then some of our higher, more risk takers and risk seekers, so that they can participate together. Inclusive playgrounds are very simple to use. Anybody should be able to walk up to it, regardless, and know how to use the features, and all the different opportunities that the features provide. The information should be in a variety of forms. So it's not just written, it's very interactive. There's very low tolerance for hazards. So it really minimizes hazards. It requires low physical effort. And then there's some very specific things around size and space approach. So, and when looking at that, inclusive playgrounds, I know the playground we just put in at the rec center, this would be much bigger than that and much more expansive. And that playground alone, also with the accessible pathways and things like that we'd have to look at Lane, was just over $350,000. Then some more, we started kind of sort of brainstorming what are other uses that we could possibly put over Lane that would be very unique and different to the rec center, right? So at the rec center, we have a kitchen, but it's more of a large space, and although we do run classes out of there, it more serves to function also the attached oral hall. We are looking at creating more of like culinary stations at Lane, not only for classes and learning and instruction, but also that we could rent out for home-based businesses. There's a lot of people, and there's growing need and interest, right, to have your own kitchen. Very expensive, but if you had a place you could rent out, to prepare your goods to sell, this could be that opportunity. We've had a lot of interest for parties. People and families would like to do some stuff for their kids. This would just be another one of those opportunities. So not only is it serving our community members, we're also building in ways that we can generate revenue to help offset the cost of operations of the space. And then lastly is a warm water pool. And there you can see just a couple different ideas. One is where you could see, so what is zero depth? I just don't want to assume that anybody would know what that means. It's just zero entry, walk in, but then also that warm water space. And like I said, it just the amount of opportunities it could provide and expand upon what we're currently offering would be a huge benefit. Right now, we run a couple adult exercise classes that are full with waiting lists. So we know there's significant need. But then there's also, we're really missing out on some opportunities, and we know there's competition in our area where we lose a lot of families to, whether they're swim schools or, places that are private fitness clubs. But also when you look at creating those equitable opportunities, the costs for those programs, I know a lot of our families, whether it's kids and or our adults, we know a lot of our seniors maybe have access to discretionary income, but that's not all of them. And we know there's a significant number of seniors in need in our community. Lately, our staff's been helping out. Hunger Task Force does what's called the Senior Stock Box Program, where they distribute food to some of our lower income residents. And we've been helping them out with them and really have an opportunity to meet and talk to some of our seniors in our community, and having additional opportunities for them as well would be extremely beneficial. So this all kind of starts with a vision, right? That's how we got to the rec center, you know, knowing that over the years, whether it was from Parkway to the admin building to the rec center, that just was really no longer a multi or a functional space for programming. And right, our community's changed, our needs have changed, recreational needs have changed. That's how that started. And then we see that for Lane as well. So this increased levy will not impact the current projects we have going on. We have the youth soccer complex that started pretty much today over at Irving, where we'll have both opportunity for you to host youth soccer and flag football all in one place. And that's the other thing that we've really struggled with, is having being able to accommodate families with multiple kids and getting to, you know, different sides of town or 2-3 different locations within relatively short periods of time. So that will not impact that. Or we're already looking to expand at the recreation center. We've ran out of room, and we need more multi-purpose room space, and there's growing need for just meetings and just that flexible space. But this will not impact that at all. We've already planned, and we're doing it now at the rec center, and you've seen that. We're absorbing operational costs into our current budget. And, you know, we're going to use that same model here, potentially at Lane. And then we're proposing, upon completion of that 4 to 5 year lease, that we'd come back to the board or work with district administration to propose a new lease extension, and what that potentially could look like. So there's some real long range visions there for Lane. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Aaron.
Thanks, Shelley. I just want to take a second and introduce Mark Duff, who's here with us tonight.
Glad to be back again.
So with that, I'm going to jump into some of the financial overview. Some of this will be overlap from our last meeting, but just to kind of provide kind of the background to how these numbers that you have in front of you are calculated, just to jump in quick to that. So as I talked about on Monday, the revenue limit, which is our membership times per pupil allocation, which will be solidifying here October 1st, plus non-recurring exemptions, or plus exemptions equal to total revenue limit authority. When we subtract out equals our aid, it equals the total levy. We take our total levy and divide it by the equalized property value of our community times 1,000 to get the mill rate. And so when in the past, when our levy has decreased and property value has increased, you've seen the mill rate kind of go in one direction, which is down. And so that's been kind of the trend over the last few years. There are a number of things that go into the total levy, but essentially on the bottom left here, you have the revenue limit tax levy, which is made up of the total amount that the property tax community pays for the school district. We also have Fund 39, which is our referendum debt, which we have none. We have the community service tax levy, Fund 80, which contributes to the total levy, and then prior levy year chargebacks. So what that means is that the total community service levy is outside the revenue limit, meaning that the board sets that amount. As you can see here from the graph, that, and this is from Monday as well, that as I mentioned before, the mill rate has been declining over the past, really since 2010 with the 1 year in 17-18. But this year, we're looking at just under a 19% decrease in the mill rate, which is projected. And this table is the tax levy analysis over time, just to kind of show you, how these figures kind of, as one changes, the others change, right? So we have in the first column is school year, the second is the mill rate, which I just showed. The next column shows you the percent decrease from the year before. And so you can see here the 18.9. The property tax levy has been decreasing, and that's consistent with our revenue limit amount decreasing and aid increasing. So as those two figures, one is declining due to our membership and aid is increasing from the state, we'll continue to see our property tax levy decrease. Should our membership stabilize and aid stabilize, then you'd see the levy stabilize. And that's kind of how that would take place. But anyway, the property tax levy percent decrease here from 21-22 to 22-23 projected is around 7%. And really, this is where the mill rate is declining at a higher rate, is because equalized property values talked about on Monday increased by just under 15% at 14.8. And so when all those things kind of are in the same formula, that's really the kind of the exponential function that's pushed the mill rate down this year. This is the community service or Fund 80's total levy over time. So as you can see, it's been really consistent here since 2017-18. And it's been there for, the past 5-6 years here. So kind of the question that Shelley proposed in her proposal is around, a $2 million increase to the levy. And so I thought, let's dive into what does that exactly mean? And so that would put at a $2 million increase to the Fund 80 levy, that would put the projected total tax levy at just under 39.5 million this year. A projected mill rate of 644. That would represent a 14.66 projected mill rate percent decrease from 21-22, 22-23 instead of an 18.9 decrease. So still would be declining, just at a lesser rate. And then I thought I would do an analysis on what that represents for a taxpayer in our community. So increasing the levy by 2 million would still allow property taxes to decrease for an example of a $250,000 home. The total property tax decrease for the school-based proportion of those taxes would decrease by $39.22. And then that would mean under this proposal, the total levy Fund 80 would be $5 million. So I put together an analysis by every $500,000 of kind of what that would do, just to kind of break that down. So you can see here in the top row, if we had no additional levy, the mill rate's at 612. At a $500,000, the mill rate's at 620. And you can see on the far right column what that means for each, at a tax impact on the average home at a $250,000 mark. And so I thought breaking that down might provide some context. In each scenario I provided, it would show a decrease for any community member. A question came up on Monday around our total debt. So I thought, this is part of a long-term bigger picture. And so as I mentioned on Monday, our debt payments under Fund 38 are declining, and we only have a few years left, which is great. That's due to a long-term kind of plan by the board and in conjunction with the administration, which included the refinance 2 years ago. So anyway, the total debt we have is just under 14 million, about half of that. Excuse me. So the last year of our debt is in 26-27, about 4 years remaining. Remaining debt exists both outside and inside the revenue limit, meaning that once our debt obligation is fulfilled, it'll reduce the levy amount to the community and also to Fund 10. So it's kind of half and half inside the revenue limit, half outside the revenue limit. So some of the benefits here, moving forward with the recreation proposal is it's a cost-effective way to obtain, usage for the recreation community program needs. Certainly if that was a need of the recreation department and this was not available, securing space for additional, athletics and gyms would be at a much higher cost than this would be. Lane, as we know from the long range facility master plan, certainly needs improvements and they're very costly. So being able to, use Fund 80 rather than the general fund to make those repairs and still offer that service to the community is definitely a benefit. As Shelley mentioned, it provides a service to our community and meets the needs of programming and certainly our athletic programs across the community. As Marty had mentioned, it aligns with the long range facility master plan, addressing the facility needs of the building. And we can accomplish all that while still reducing the tax rate and stabilizing the levy for the community. So with that, I will turn it back to Marty, I believe.
Yep. Yeah, so we've started working on some draft communication kind of behind the scenes, because as this conversation gets going, we want to get ahead of kind of some of the messages that might start to spin into the community. One of the key sets of messages that really it's creating this opportunity really through sound fiscal management, sound fiscal planning, right? So this is something that arises out of really good work. it really expands the high value recreation and athletic opportunities. So that, one of the things that I think the community really does love about the work we do is the recreation and community services that Shelley leads. And so it really expands that and expands the opportunity for us to tell the story. It does increase the recreation portion of the tax levy, right? So we have to be honest about that, right? So that's a $2 million increase is what we're proposing. There's room to go higher than that and still have the mill rate overall drop. But you could go less than that as well. And I think we would then spread it over more time to accomplish the project. But the recreation portion of the tax levy goes up, but the overall mill rate, the plan is that it would still go down. One of the things that, Aaron and I, and Mark will probably now when I say this too, is that what we were trained in coming through programs to lead school districts is to work really hard to try to keep the mill rate as even as possible. And the dynamics around what's happened with property values and declining enrollment hasn't allowed us to do that very effectively, because when you have these dramatic drops, it's really hard to convince people that education should be worth as much as you were paying 5 years ago. So to get it back up causes, more eyebrows raising than maybe what we're proposing right now. And to keep it smooth is what really the goal is. And so this is an opportunity to try to do that in some ways, but still provide some relief to property owners in the community. It also maintains access to high quality gym space, and that I think Shelley told that story really well, even in the conversations, because I've shared that with the board, the notes from the conversations with the city of West Allis about what we might do at these schools that'll be vacant in a year. Their interest, of course, is to get the schools back on the property tax rolls. Well, that might mean we lose this gym entirely because it's one of the better gyms that we have. It's the newest gym, and it's fully air conditioned. The only other air conditioned gym is at West. Central's not air conditioned. Hale's gyms aren't air conditioned, but Lane's is. And so keeping that within the portfolio spaces, I think, makes sense. And then it really also the resources that come through the lease arrangement, we would recommend that they get directed into other CIP projects. It's important to think about the lease payments as sort of one-time money. And when you have one-time money, you want to put it into what should be considered kind of one-time expenses. So we've talked about things within the CIP project around new lighting at the athletic complex. That's an expensive investment, but we're investing quite a bit to make that a state-of-the-art facility. We've also started to talk about air conditioning in buildings, which again are, especially with 100-year-old buildings, get to be pretty significant investments. But there's an opportunity here with new dollars that come through from Fund 80 to Fund 10. And the board could direct them into Fund 46, and then it becomes part of that plan. But there's opportunities there to support the CIP needs. And that is part of the feedback we heard during the referendum. How can you don't have this in the budget to fix some of these things instead of coming out, in a referendum? So that opportunity sits there. And then it also maintains school board control of the property itself. And so, this board will have very different people 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now. And who knows what the needs will be 30 years from now. If the board still owns that particular piece of property, well, then there's some flexibility built in, whether that's recreation or it returns to a school or it becomes a big athletic field. It's still a decision the board gets to make versus, having sold it to a developer or a different school operator. So we think those are important key messages. Again, we have this in a press release form kind of written up, and then bullet kind of these key message and additional ones that we'll share with the board as you start to get questions in the community. We'll take that if the board is starting to move down this road. I think we're going to share that release, turn it into a letter that can go to families, and then also do some leafleting, so door hangers around a lane, to draw attention to the fact that there's a proposal being considered so that neighbors get to start to know about it now. And if there is input, then there's still opportunity with a couple board meetings before the final budget is approved. The proposal would mean that we're asking the board to consider this, and our recommendation is to approve it with the budget for the 22-23 school year. And even though Lane doesn't close until the end of the current school year, right? So you may be wondering, well, why include it in this budget? Why can't I wait till next year? again, we're trying to manage smoothing the mill rate a bit, so it doesn't drop to the 612 and then bring it back up, right? So it's that dynamic, but also if the board approves this now, it allows recreation to begin the planning. And you know how long it takes to get construction projects to move and what's happening with supply chain and costs. So the more firm we are going to contractors and going to architectural firms, the better. You know, if they know the board is committed to this, they'll start to move the project along with us. So with that, it's time for conversation. I don't know, Mark, if you want to add anything at this point into what we've shared so far. Mark's been working with Aaron behind the scenes on this, and that's why we asked Mark to join us tonight.
Yes, this was actually a really fun project to work on. It's a very creative way to maintain a facility for the uses of the district and the community. And it's got a fully well thought out financing structure that will be a win-win for the community service program, the taxpayers, and also for the general fund of the district. So and as indicated, a lot of these Fund 80 is pretty complicated. We've been thoroughly working through this. And some of these things are similar to what other districts are already doing. So this is like I said, it was great to work on this concept and on the financial structures and all the other areas that need to be worked out.
Yeah, could you, Mark, or Aaron, talk about the conversations with DPI? So this has also been vetted through the Department of Public Instruction. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And John, feel free to jump in intermittently. I know you had extensive conversation with Roger as well. So in the conversation we had with DPI, a lot of districts do use Fund 80 in similar capacities to, whether it be in terms of leasing property or in terms of, looking to create additions for certain programming, things like that. I know Mark had talked a lot about his time in Racine of building community pools and things like that, that the schools were then able to use and kind of rent back for things like that, for competitions and the like. So the conversation around ownership and leasing is really where John kind of helped step in and have those discussions. The district and the recreation center are the same entity. And so essentially selling Lane to itself isn't really an option. And so what other districts who have the recreation department a part of, it's a department of the district, leasing it is really what other districts do. And we saw that here at the 1205 building when the recreation center was in the 4th floor. They leased it from us because they weren't their own, they're a part of a district, they're a department of us. And so, this strategy, like as Mark had mentioned, is widely used across the state and it's completely allowable by DPI. I don't know, John, Mark, any other thoughts to share with the board?
I think you summed up very well what Roger at DPI told me as well. He very clearly said that if you wanted to front load the payments, this $5 million, I believe it is, to be paid over $250,000, I'm sorry, to be paid over the 5 years, that can be done. I have a little issue with that because once that 5 years is over, then the lease payments under this proposal are supposed to go down to zero. And when you think about a lease, if you're going to lease a house, that's worth $250,000. You can lease it for 5 years. You don't pay $50,000 a year for the property. You just pay something less than that. You pay fair market rental for that property. The trade-off is you may be paying less fair market rental than you would if you're paying purchase price over 5 years. But you can also rent it into perpetuity theoretically. So I think we do have to be a little careful front loading the funds at this point, knowing that a day of reckoning is going to come when payments are over and we slide back down to the $1 or some other nominal amount. This transaction will be scrutinized very carefully. I have no doubt. So we want to make sure that from the financial perspective, it makes sense. From the community's perspective, I think the best way to do that is to make sure that the payments are structured such that they represent true fair market lease value. that's a little bit different than work through at this point in time. But
Yeah, we're still working on getting those evaluations at this point.
I understand the district has engaged or is going to engage an appraiser who's certified to do this type of work. Will give us true fair market value opinion in terms of sale price and also fair market rental value. I think once we get both of those numbers, then we'll be able to determine, where the appropriate rental amount may fall. And that may be able to be done in 5 years of planning, or if the rentals are less than the full aggregate, then stretch out the lease term a little bit longer.
I think one of the other things too that we had talked about in conjunction with Shelley is what's unique about this is that Shelley's proposal kind of has built-in contingency plans. And what I mean by that is, let's just say in the 23-24 budget, the board says, hey, we really need to reduce down this levy. We want to, again, make sure that our property tax levy to the community is decreasing as membership decreases, et cetera. So a part of, and maybe Shelley, you want to speak this a bit too, but part of Shelley's plan, each step, she has a contingency built in where that if the levy went to 0 after the first year, they would have the ability to, I believe, seal up the construction part and have the gym space available for the community still. So there's options to, whether it's reduced, either pushed out over years, things like that, because it is similar to Marty had mentioned, like one-time money. And this is not something that we would, it's to, I guess, renovate the space and provide the service. Well, the renovation isn't going to last forever. And so being able to reduce that and then keep those operational costs within her current budget at the $3 million mark is really the plan. But being able to have the flexibility for the board is really, I think, really something to be considerate of. We talked a lot about that. Shelley, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you did a great job, Aaron, summarizing, and that's why we did it sort of in those staged phases. Right, the first is probably the most crucial piece, and that is the demolition of the old existing, and then that sealing up, and then, from there, there's always opportunity to reevaluate and reassess things and make different plans.
So, questions, conversation?
So I guess I had one question. So part of the reason of closing Lang obviously was to save money for the district. And I know a lot of that cost was in personnel costs, right? So if we continue to control the building, we still have to maintain it, pay for electricity, heating, things like that. So I know what's been proposed is a $500,000 lease payment, which may change depending on what we get back from the appraisers. But what number would we have to be at to ensure that we're not continuing to pay for upkeep of the building? So if we sold it for sale, right, we wouldn't have to worry about any of that, right? Insurance, all that sort of stuff. Don't have to worry about it. If we maintain control of it, do lease to rec, what dollar figure is the going to cost the district to still hang on to the building? I'm just looking at this strictly from a financial standpoint at this point, so that we're not, losing money per se because we're upkeeping it still, and versus the lease payment that we're going to get, right? So what I would like to see, and I think what the community would like to see to make this more palatable, is that if the building was going to stay within the district, that the cost to the district minus the fee that we're getting paid for a lease payment from the rec is a positive and not a negative. So do we have any idea on those figures at this point about how much it would cost?
Yeah, at this point, no. I think the reason why that is because I think in our preliminary discussion, some of the discussion we had, which really was focused around, recreation, renovating the space, would be that they take on those costs completely.
So they'd be doing the lawn mowing, the show
Yep.
removal,
Utilities monthly, things like that.
utilities, all that stuff. So then it would be all profit.
That was the thinking at this point. Yeah.
Okay, is that allowable?
It definitely is. What we're talking about is what's referred to as a triple net lease, essentially, where the tenant, which is the rec department, pays the rent to the district. They pay the insurance, the pay. If there were common area maintenance charges, they would pay those. Then they pay all maintenance and repairs. So we can certainly do that. In which case, as I understand it, all those expenses will be coming out of funding.
Correct. And I guess Shelley, is that something that is a concern? Because as we mentioned, I know we're renovating and talking about taking down the old part of the building, which was a lot of what that CIP cost was, but things happen, right? Roofs leak, you know, that sort of stuff that we have to worry about doing. Is that going to put a stress on your budget beyond what you've proposed for the levy increase?
I do not anticipate that, no, and that's kind of based off the model we currently have at the recreation center, right? We've absorbed operational costs in terms of maintenance, utilities, and we've been able to, with increased revenue that we've seen, you know, not only from programs at the rec center, but outside our other programs growth, and this would be more opportunities for additional revenues, that those costs, those additional revenues would offset the operational costs. The operational costs we've taken on at the recreation center as, you know, it's been built into our current existing budget, and we would do the same at Lane. And we have the current funds within where we're at now, so once that does drop back down, to be able to take that on.
I have a few questions.
Yeah.
So technically, we're saying, we started the conversation by saying no cost to taxpayers for the school portion of property tax, but technically that's not true in that it will be lower, but it would not be as low as it would be if we didn't do this project, correct?
Correct.
So,
That's correct.
and I get that. And so as a taxpayer, I'm saying, you know, I'm still going to be saving money and,
Mhm.
but it's not a no cost to taxpayers. And I would like to think of a different way to say that. I'd like to be really upfront with that. And how even legally or, you know, as we,
Mhm.
if we do move forward with this.
Yeah,
I-
so let me clarify it. Jane.
Okay.
The no cost to taxpayers was when Shelley was talking about the proposed addition to the current recreation center that she has built into her reserves right now and to the revenue that is being generated. So that addition is no new cost to the taxpayer.
Okay.
I think, yeah, I
So I'm
think
talking
you're,
about like the mill rate and like so it would go from,
755.
Yep.
To 644 at the proposed rate.
okay,
But it could have, it
But
could
without,
go
yeah,
down to
but if it was, if
612.
we didn't have the recs, so basically we're adding, so if it was at 612,
okay.
it's gonna be it'd be upping it up 32 cents.
That's also why we're looking at trying to do it now. So
Yeah, yeah, so it actually, yeah.
stops at 6:30.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
but you are right, Jane. I mean, that was, Shelley made the comment in reference to the addition to the rec center, but it would come at a cost to the community, but it would be less than currently they pay now.
Yes.
That's kind
And
of
I
the,
get that,
yeah,
and-
yep,
But I just want to be really clear. with that.
absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely,
Okay.
yep.
All right. And then, you know, we talked about the culinary piece. And so are you talking about, Shelley, are you talking about that space being for the community and for like adult classes and things like that? Or is there, were we thinking about in some way infusing students, high school students into working with the community or the high schools using the facility as well?
I would say probably both. So right now we see, we're seeing a great need for, people want more, our cooking classes are more demonstration, right? People, you know, the instructors preparing and showing, but people want hands-on. So that this would be an opportunity for more hands-on. And how do I use some of these kitchen tools, you know, to do some of these things? Then also an opportunity for, like I said, a revenue generating piece could potentially be for people that want to make and sell. And right, there's things we have to look into in terms of commercial, you know, type grade kitchen spaces. Then also, yeah, that opportunity could exist for students to use it, you know, whether it's classes through our department or programs in partnership with the district. I will say there was a small period where we had some students working while some stuff was getting done, finished up, and we loved having them in the building. It's really neat when two community members, when you have preschool, so families that have maybe not stepped into our schools yet, and then some older adults who haven't had kids in the school in a long time, and then students in the building all at the same time and all seeing different things going on. That really is a great experience, and I think it really helps showcase to new families what we have to offer as a district, but also helps those that don't have kids in our schools see some of those things, right, that they normally wouldn't see because they're not within school buildings during the day.
One of the, I think, the premier benefits is that creating a space that works for everyone, right? It works for the community, works for students and families who might not attend our schools, and works for our schools. And I think, Mark, you may speak to that best with the pools, that the community pools and kind of how that worked in Racine, because I think, Jane, you hit on a great point. And like, we should create space that our schools can use. And that's a great option. And one of the biggest things now, it came up during the consolidation discussion with the high schools, is that we don't have enough kitchens for our kids to use.
Right.
Every year, I can't even tell you how many kids get turned away from culinary arts. So to have that as an option, and maybe Mark, you can talk a little bit how that works, how that worked for you.
Yeah, so one of the things that would have, in Racine, we built a aquatic center so that all high schools would use it instead of paying for 3 pools. All high schools would use it, but also the community, because we had a demand for it, just like you have demand for gym space for outside groups. We had a demand for swimming groups. The only challenge is, so we used Fund 80 to build that facility, and it was like 20-something million dollars. So it was quite a project. The only thing to keep in mind is that if Fund 80 pays for it, it's for the entire community, and it's non-educational purposes. So if you do have classes in there, there has to be some method of accounting for the general fund paying for use of that culinary program.
Okay.
So there has to be some accounting mechanism that would be worked out in the finance office to record that, but
Like
it still is
renting
available.
the space for that period of time. Yeah.
So there are ways to do that, but that, in fact, because Fund 80 and Racine bought the pool, the district had to rent the pool. So it's almost flip of what you're saying, doing here.
Mhm.
So the Fund 80 is renting it for the district because the general fund owns it. We're seeing they had to flip. So they have to actually pay Fund 80 to use the pool. So this is nicer. That's why I like it. So hopefully that explained what
Yeah,
you.
but that's a great point, I think, Jane. So just wanted to say that. So
Also, you know, I'm always looking for lanyards for the teachers, of course, and benefits and you know, with our strategic plan, you know, employee engagement. How will staff benefit for this? I know you said, you know, oh, staff can go to classes or whatever, but I really would love some specifics on that. Classes available before and after school at discounted to our staff, things like that. I would love to see that as something that we could put as part of the things that we're doing to encourage longevity with staff.
Yeah, and Shelley, you can jump in here more on the fitness center concept, but the idea of this facility being a little different than the current recreation center, and the fact that it would have a fitness center in a smaller scale, but similar to, you know, Experience or Planet Fitness. And the models, and it's what I was used to in Shorewood, the model there is as a benefit of employment, you get a free membership to the fitness center. You know, and we've even brainstormed a little bit about, you know, what would it be like if the wellness center moved there someday? And so now the fitness center and the wellness center are next week, right? So there are some interesting synergies that start to happen. So Shelley, I don't know if you want to add more detail to that.
Yeah, the other thing, Jane, we hope this would provide too, like, you know, people like to back things up, right? Like I want to get in some cardio or I want to do some free weights, having that fitness center. And then also right now where we struggle is to provide classes for staff, right? And this would give additional opportunities, and we know that we actually have some staff that are interested in teaching, but they want to do it right after school. Typically all of our elementary schools don't have that space. Our intermediate schools, depending time of year, have intermediate school sports and really don't have any, alternative, good spaces for that. And then the same kind of at the high schools, the spaces that are, would be conducive to that aren't available. This would provide that. And we could also kind of scaffold it, right? So there could be classes because we know high school gets out at a different time than intermediate than elementary. And that's kind of where we're struggling now too, is trying to find something that fits, would be attractive to all those staff members. So, and right, the idea of, we've already kind of had some conversations with the wellness center, what type of classes could we run together? Or could that be packaged into, some plans for staff? Getting some help at the wellness center and then utilizing the fitness center as well.
Glad to hear that.
Anything else, Jane?
Good for me.
Nice deal.
Sorry. So I just have a question in terms of neighborhood associations. So I really like the idea, like when I read this, I was like, this is awesome, especially for the West Side people. But I'm wondering, like, what's the commitment in terms of, like, I'd like to be able to sell this to like the people in like Rose Hill. We kind of fell apart because one of the issues was that we couldn't get into Madison, and then it was costly, and we were trying to start our organization. So I'm wondering, like, what are we looking at in terms of developing relationships with neighborhood associations and kind of providing those spaces when they need them?
So unfortunately, I'm not in West Dallas right now via why I'm on Zoom. And I know the city's meeting, having like a kind of open house with the neighborhood associations. I believe it's this Thursday. And so I have some staff that are going to be attending. We're really looking to build just some better relationships with our neighborhood associations. And you bring up, that's really kind of the point we're trying to make, is it's challenging to give them access. There's staffing challenges, whether it's just us trying to find staff that can work to get them access, and then B, covering those costs. Or if we had a facility, East End, West End, we're already open. We already have staff in there in the evening. We have custodial staff there. So it doesn't mean bringing on additional staff or finding additional people. So yeah, looking at different ways we can partner better with our neighborhood associations to help them do some of the things they're trying to do. And then at the same time, we can learn from them. What is it that our community members really want? How do we reach some of our residents that we're currently not reaching and currently not serving? They are probably a really good resource for us. So we're hoping to build some better relationships. And we think by being able to support them a little more in some of the things they're trying to do and the activities they're trying, or their meetings, that this could be a win-win for both of us.
Any other questions? I have one question talking about, has this been broached with the city at all yet? And I know the city is trying to determine how to work with their senior center. And it seems like a lot of the things proposed for this space are centered somewhat about trying to provide things for seniors in our community. So is that possible opportunity to partner with the city? And I'm not familiar exactly what all is offered at the current senior center in West Dallas, but to maybe, we have a space, we're looking at doing things with the space. Might be a space that the seniors would be able to also go to for maybe additional things beyond what we're talking about here, is fitness classes or other classes for them, maybe for other space. I don't know if it's something have we talked to the city all about this? Do they know about this proposal? City government?
Yep, so I'll take the first part of that, and then Shelley, I'm not sure where you are in the conversations around services for retirees or the senior center, but that has been broached. That I did discuss this. So maybe we run into that meeting, the city schools meeting. So I did share this with Mayor Dan Devine, that recreation was going to be coming forward with a proposal around Lane and creating a new recreation and fitness center. And so they're at least, and Rebecca was there too, so they're at least aware of this. And I did at that time mention, again, I recognize the city's interest is in, getting properties back on the tax rolls, but that may not necessarily be the best use of the facility from the board's perspective and interest. We've also talked about, there is a school operator that's expressed interest in the building. But that also means it's not on the tax rolls, so that doesn't help the cities or support the city's interest. And I think, from our perspective, one of the big things is that gym, right? So trying to maintain control of that space to support not only recreation, but athletics. So Shelley, I don't know if you could please add more around on the senior center services and where some of those conversations are.
Yeah, so the senior center has recently kind of gone on a shift in management now, the senior centers with the health department, and we actually have a really good working relationship with a number of staff at the health department, and have been having several meetings with both the leadership at the senior center and the health department, and how can we partner together better. So we're not duplicating services, and or we can learn more about what each other is doing and when they do it and how they do it. And I guess we're also looking at, the senior center in Ostalis is open primarily during the day, but we know that we have a number of seniors that still work, or that are still very active. So, we're also talking about who are our target populations. And again, we really are starting to work more hand in hand with them. We're providing opportunities for them to advertise in our guide. They're providing opportunities for our staff to go on over there. We're doing some programming together, a senior resource fair, some different events. We have a kind of a pilot program in place where if you have a senior center membership, that gives you a discounted rate for one or two of our classes. So we're starting to see a lot more because they don't have instructors to offer that, but their pricing structure is a little bit different than ours. So just, really starting to work together more to really support each other. And again, not duplicate.
I just think it might be an opportunity. If we are going to put dollars in renovating that building and spaces and so forth and so on, that maybe we can work with the city as a partner, and part of that, and maybe either expand upon it with other additional dollars coming in from the city budget, or maybe they're providing staffing for certain things. And I don't know how their situation is right now, but just as we go through this process to try to keep those conversation lines open and see what opportunities that we can make the best use of the spaces that we have for moving forward with this.
You're a similar line, so we didn't add this in terms of the formal conversation, but it's worth, I think, for the board to have this in mind, is the need for permanent administrative offices, right? So that's part of the long-range facility master plan problem that needs to get solved. And right now, we're exploring if the available space at 9333, meaning what's not used by the wellness center on the main floor, and then some of the space that's not used in the lower level, is enough square footage to house the offices absent a big boardroom and meeting room, right? So there wouldn't be enough space there for that for sure.
Mhm.
But if we now have two recreation centers that have big meeting rooms, there's options for the board, and that might get interesting, that a board could then alternate, right? So that you're meeting on the east side, you're meeting on the west side. And why should we build another large space like this when we're going to have spaces like this? I mean, the space right now at the current recreation center is much more functional than this. The parking is a lot easier, and it's way easier to get in and out of that building for the public. So there are other things that may find solutions, other needs that may find solutions as we work through this process. So that could be one of them.
Other questions?
For the lease payment of the $500,000, will that throw a wrench into the mill rate? Because like when we sold our building and had an income, that threw a wrench into the mill rate. I believe bumped it, didn't it?
Yeah,
Okay.
it did. Yeah. And that was a large amount. So essentially our revenue increased and we didn't spend the money. That's what I mentioned at last week's meeting. When you have a challenge with fund balance and you're saving money, it actually hits you the next year because you get less aid. So that burden then shifts to the property tax levy. So with this amount, I've already talked about having a plan to use those funds. Moving money to Fund 46 is considered an expense. So it deters exactly what you're talking about. We've also talked preliminary about looking at opening up a defeasance for debt. Moving money into 38, like proactively, is not considered an expense, but opening a defeasance or like an escrow account as we know it allows it to be considered expendable. So things like that, if we wanted to, in lieu of using the money from 1135 building sale, we could look at maybe using this to do renovations in some capacity. So there's options, but if we did nothing with it, you're right, that's what would happen. Yeah.
Anything else? Mr. Becker, I don't want to forget about you. Did you have any questions regarding this?
Most of them have been answered. About the only one I had was that was not touched on was it sounded like somebody was kind of getting into the direction of it where maybe you can tie fitness center attendance from teachers or attendance in classes like a certain frequency gives them a break on their insurance premiums, that kind of a thing. Maybe we can kind of incentivize it and drive more utilization.
Yeah.
Just a general question.
Possibility, especially with a in-district fitness center that's available. Yeah, that would. I would
Yeah, that's
love
a
to
good
have
idea.
that, explore that kind of option.
Yeah, it's a good idea, Joe.
And you did it again, so I presume that's all. So at this point, what are we looking at? So what are the next steps?
So next steps, what I've been playing with here is our draft communication while you've been talking, and I've added some kind of the key messages. When we're done here, I'll share this with the board. So you have a chance to provide a little bit of feedback. And I think I want to suggest that we push this out publicly now so that so we limit the amount of kind of surprised people potentially, just because the timeline here is pretty quick, meaning the end of October, we're going to be asking for a decision. So we begin the communication process into doing some, like I said, some door hangers around Lane and potentially a community meeting in the neighborhood. So neighbors are aware of what's being proposed. And then we'll bring back the final details of it inside of the 22-23 budget, right? So the numbers
October
that-
24th. Yeah.
Right, so the numbers that were presented are gonna change now, right? Because of, what my sense is, you want us to keep working on this, is a little bit of, here, like, whoa, slow down, don't do this, and it's like, keep moving forward, so that I think is the next step is communicating and building this into the budget. Mark, I don't know if you see any other additional steps in the process.
I think, yeah, if the board is comfortable with incorporating it into the budget, it's already been built, and we can start working to further incorporate that. And then we've already are working with legal counsel.
Hoping to have those evaluations
Right.
early next week, if not by then next week. So we'll have these numbers shored up. I don't think the number that we had in mind, the 500, is going to be too far off, given the fact what we pay for the space here for a couple floors. It's just south of 400. So I don't think it's going to be too far off, but we'll get the information from the experts and build that accordingly.
Yeah, I think that if we're looking at, fair market value, the community can't complain about we're not getting as much money as we could if we just outright sold it. The same token, we're still being able to control the area so that we do want to find use for that space later on. And then additionally, it is an amenity for the community as a whole. So even though it actually opens up to more people than the building is currently being utilized for, it would, obviously if we sold to a private entity, most likely would then go to nothing. So I think those are all good benefits. I think just making sure we know what those dollar figures are, knowing for sure that the costs can be basically borne by Fund 80 so that the district is still realizing the savings that we initially were closing Lane for, I think is an important thing to know. So as long as that is all true and we get those numbers nailed down and I'm sure is comfortable with them, then I think that, I'm not seeing anyone super upset or red faced over there. So I think we're all right. If I hear anything from Kristen or Brian, that is has questions about, I'll make sure to direct them towards you to get those answered. But then we'll look for that communication to come out to the community later this week. We're looking at.
I think so.
Yeah, okay. So any last minute questions or comments? Is everyone okay with that? And then we have these nice 1-page, 1.5 pagers here that we can refer to if we get questions from the community or see something on social media. Okay. I believe that is all. So thank you so much, Mr. Duff and Mr. Shore, for being here and helping answer our questions. Thank you, Aaron, and your team, and Dr. Stewart for putting out these communications, I'm sure. This is an interesting proposal. I think it's a unique way to use space that we have. And at this point, looks like a win-win-win. So looking forward to the communication coming out, hearing what some of the community has to say, and moving on from there. So if there's nothing more, I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.